This is Jasper.
And this is Randy. Up next, we are talking about Django Unchained from 2012. This is written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. Overview. With the help of a German bounty hunter, a freed slave sets out to rescue his wife from a brutal Mississippi plantation owner.
Mississippi.
This is starring, there's a lot of people, but I'll just do like kind of the highlighted main cast. Django is played by Jamie Foxx. Christoph Waltz is Dr. Schultz. Leonardo DiCaprio as Calvin Candy. Kerry Washington as Broomhilda. And Samuel L. Jackson as Steven. And a whole bunch of, there's a lot of people in this. There's a lot of people that pop up in weird, smaller roles. That's kind of interesting. Don Johnson, Michael Parks returns in this. He's been in lots of Tarantino movies. And even though he's, it's a Western or a Southern, as Tarantino calls it, it's his Southern, it's not a Western. Michael Parks basically feels like he's playing the same character that he did in Death Proof and Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror and Kill Bill. Anyway, Django Unchained. Since you started last time, I'll start this time. I have seen this before. I've seen this several times, and I quite enjoy this movie. I think I know the answer to this, but Jasper, have you seen it before, and what do you think of it?
I've seen it, I think, 3 times. This is probably my favorite Tarantino movie so far.
Interesting.
Let me just start off. I thought this is a weird movie. One, so kind of connects them, as everybody knows, that Will Smith was tapped to play Django.
You're right. I didn't even. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think of that extra connection to Wild Wild West. Okay.
Yeah, and so because he didn't take the role because of the use of the N-word.
Okay. But
I didn't think really Jamie Foxx could play this kind of role. But then again, when you watch this movie, I was totally wrong.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really like Jamie Foxx in this.
I love him, but the big person I love in this movie is Christoph Waltz.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but every movie I've seen with him now, of course, the 2 Tarantino movies, the dude he sets like a precedence in the movie, and he's got a calm demeanor, but he's pretty much evil,
Mm-hmm.
But they said that he don't want to play an evil person, but it's like he's kind of evil, but he's doing everything well within the law,
Yeah, he's great in this, and I mean, he's Christoph Waltz. He has a certain voice. He's got the German accent. So, he doesn't sound that much different than his character in Inglourious Basterds, but it's still a very different performance because he puts off a totally different thing. He is extremely likable in this movie, I think. And I think in Inglourious Basterds, his character is enjoyable, but he's not necessarily likable. He's a bad dude. Mm. But in this, he does bad things, but he's got heart.
If not for Jamie Foxx, he is the center of this movie. And I mean, we'll get in, into Leonardo DiCaprio's role, but they worked very well together, mm-hmm. which would be kind of weird. Because Christoph Waltz, of what I've seen and read about him, and he's kind of that old era actor. It's the art of it, and Jamie Foxx is just kind of that entertainment actor. But they have such a good chemistry on screen.
Yeah, I would agree. Jamie Foxx is interesting in this because, and it makes sense, when you start the movie, he's a slave. Even as a quote-unquote free man, it's not a good time for a black person around there. It's, he still has to, be real careful. But I think you get an interesting kind of progression of his character, or at least he seems more timid, might not be the right word, but part of it is definitely unsure of this Christoph Waltz guy, for the first part. And you actually kind of get a sense that he opens up a bit as the movie goes on. And then by the end, he's Django, right? He's a bad. And not to say he's not at the beginning of the movie, but he's put in the position to where he can embrace it. I don't know.
What I liked about this too was where he gets talking with Candy, that they portray him as the eyes to purchase fighters, A slave gets tore up by dogs because Candy tells him, to kill him for running away. And you think that Django's going to just jump off and start shooting. And the whole time he's just locked eyes with Candy.
Oh, when he plays the role of, as he called it, a black slaver.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Like, that's tense because, first off, he commits and he's bold and unapologetic, and he sells it. He sells the whole thing better than Christoph Waltz character does. But also, at the same time, there's tension because you're like, is Candy gonna put up with that? Like, that's not, and you get the sense from everybody's reaction, that's not normal behavior for even a quote-unquote free man. Everybody's shocked by it, including Christoph Waltz, who's like, at one point takes him aside, is like, you better chill. And he's like, I am chill. This is what we're here to do. I'm intriguing him. I like that whole thing is awesome. So last episode, I'm like, Tarantino makes a movie set in World War II, and he still makes it about movies. How is he, and I didn't recall, how is he going to make Django Unchained a Western about movies? Because in some way he's going to.
Mm-hmm.
He did it in that it's about acting because they have roles. They go into situations. He's like, okay, so here's your role. Here's my role. You're this guy and whatever. And I'm this guy. I'm going to act this way. And he still makes it about acting or, in some way it's still about film or theater. That said, I do like that setup. I think it's great.
And just the way he delivers the line, because he's like, oh, your friend looks a little green in the gills there. I don't think he's got the stomach, he's trying to figure out if they're actually there for that. I don't think he's got the stomach for Mandingo fighting, and he's like, no, he's just never seen a man torn apart by dogs before. He's like, if this is what you're showing me, then I'm not impressed. He's totally committed.
And cold. And he keeps getting mean mugged, eyeballed by the one slave that Candy owns. But eventually he kind of figures it out. He's like, oh, I get it. He's Django.
Right.
Like a lot of Tarantino movies, especially this and Inglourious Bastards, I really grouped together, more so than Hateful Eight, which we'll talk about next episode. But I grouped these two together because they're both kind of period pieces, but they also have yes, Pulp Fiction is a collection of scenes, but both of these movies are a collection of scenes, and each scene feels very contained or very unique to itself. There's the couple of bounties they do where they track down the one guy that had whipped him and Broomhilda, or the couple of guys. That whole section is awesome and super memorable. And this movie is just full of little bits like that. Again, not to compare, but whereas in Inglourious Bastards we had Jewish soldiers shooting Hitler in the face, here we get Django whipping the guy who whipped him as a slave. And
it's one of my favorite parts.
And then towards the end, just blowing dudes away. Let's talk about the gunplay, because anytime the guns come out, the blood is insane. And
right.
It's not like Kill Bill blood spray. It's like Jello dynamite. It's like big chunks of just gelatinous blood and goo explode off of people. And the sound design really embraces that texture, because it's not just bang bang or body hits or something. It's like bowls of Jello getting thrown against a wall, just blah.
Yeah, and it's way over.
It's super over the top. Yeah, intentionally so. I think Tarantino took some slack for that. This movie in particular, he took some slack for the violence. But I'm like, I don't feel like the violence in this is at all as bad as in some movies, even if those movies are more low-key with their blood, because this is cartoonishly bloody. It's so over the top that it kind of takes some of that edge off. And I feel like maybe that's the point, to where he doesn't want the audience to feel bad about these gunfights. He wants it to be fun, because this is supposed to be kind of a cathartic moment.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the outrage, well, in general, outrage about violence and stuff, but the outrage about violence in this movie specifically, because Are you kidding? It's so unrealistic. It's like when a horror movie just goes so over the top with blood that you laugh. This goes to those kind of levels. Like the one guy who during the big gunfight in Candy's house, there's one guy who just on the floor who just keeps getting shot over and over, and he's just the whole time like, oh, whoa, 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 and it's like, what?
Like the first time he shot somebody, or it was what, the Brittle brother that was on the. No, it was the slave owners in the first one, and where he shot. I think he shot part of the horse, and then the guy was just like, you know, like it was crazy.
I will say the horse. I think just because it's an animal, and sure, it's the same kind of gelatinous funk, like blah, and weird Jello explosion, but it's like the top of this horse's head just explodes. That's pretty shocking. But then it continues it, and you're just like, oh, it's just all over the top. You can like hear the blood hit the ground after this. Like, It's so crazy.
I don't think blood does that.
Again, as I was saying earlier, there's so many little bits, cool bits and pieces that we can't just talk about them all. Just know there's a lot of stuff in this that I like. Tarantino's good about coming up with intense, intriguing scenes. Mm-hmm. And this is, like a lot of his movies, a collection of those intense, intriguing scenes. I kind of feel like narratively this is woven together more cohesively than some of his other movies. Like, for the most part, Inglourious Basterds does have an overarching plot, but its little individual scenes still feel very separated. This does feel a bit more cohesive to me.
Yeah, more like it's supposed to be one movie, you know?
Yeah, and I guess there's not the chapters and stuff, so maybe that's part of it. Like, he's not drawing attention to these individual sequences. There's some music cues that stick out, but it's not the usual Tarantino music cues. It's more modern, like rap music and stuff, which is interesting. But for the most part, some of the more jarring elements of Tarantino, like influences that he usually pulls into movies, I don't feel like those are here. At least not in an extremely jarring way. Mm-hmm. It just, in general, feels more cohesive to me than some of his other movies.
This is like the most like fluid movie, yeah.
But this is another one where, yeah, it's long. But on a rewatch, this recent rewatch, it breezed by for me. As usual, this movie looks great. Wonderful shots in this that I really enjoy. I don't know, the look of it's just like, it's bright. The color is just spot on. I don't know. Great looking movie, good cinematography. Not surprising with a Tarantino movie, but also like, I hate to keep comparing, but or at least bringing up points, but like I said last episode with Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino has a good vision, and he works with good cinematographers. Maybe he always works with the same guy. I'm not sure. I should look into that. But I think his movies benefit from being taken out of, you know, urban settings like a lot of his early movies, and being put out in more rural settings or more unique settings. You know, World War II, there's a lot of France in World War II, the 40s. And then this obviously there's several settings in the South, got some winter stuff, some spring stuff, summer stuff, like you get different seasons. I think his filmmaking benefits from interesting locales because, man, he knows how to shoot them and they look fantastic.
Right.
With a lot of these Tarantino movies, there's a lot we could dig into, but it's only interesting for so long to listen to. So let's get to star ratings. Jasper.
Yes.
I think you're up first.
Well, every actor that was in here that had a main role did their job and did very well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think Tarantino, you know, he knows what he's looking for when he makes movies. With that, the cinematography and all that stuff, I gave it a 5 out of 5.
The leads, you know, Candy, of course, Schultz and Django. We didn't even talk about Samuel L. Jackson, who apparently was not happy to have to play that role, but he's like, okay, well, whatever, that's the role. But they're all fantastic and memorable and interesting, unique characters. Candy, DiCaprio kills it, man. Candy is such a weird and like kind of fascinating to watch. He has this weird energy, but he's also like just a bad dude, and you know it.
Leo actually had to take a break because he was so upset with the words used and the racial slurs that his character is using. that Samuel L. You're going to censor split. Samuel L. pulled him aside and said, this is just a regular Tuesday for us." And then apparently that made it all better for him.
Dude, that's something I was thinking about watching that. And, of course, Samuel L. Jackson's right. But knowing how that word affects people, and then even if you're acting, having to say the things that some of the characters say here, it's gotta feel weird. It's gotta feel uncomfortable. Can't imagine how it wouldn't, Of course, everybody's professionals and actors and understand that, and they signed on to the movie, but still, interesting. Yeah, no, so I'll give this 5 stars. I enjoyed this a lot upon this rewatch. I figured I would. This was one of the ones when we started season Terran 3. This is one of the ones I think I was looking forward to most. This and Inglourious Bastards. They're both very enjoyable, so yeah.
I would say this is the one I was looking forward to.
I kind of got the sense from you, yeah.